Good morning. My name is Stephanie Ford. I'm a graduate student at Morningside College and a kindergarten teacher at Arweva Elementary. And this is my presentation on the Best of Both Worlds, a hybrid transitional kindergarten TK program. So I began my study thinking that not every student is ready for kindergarten because there are many students that are not ready, especially by today's kindergarten standards. So students that aren't ready have two options. They can be sent to kindergarten and hope for the best, or they can be supported in a TK setting. And that's where the study really hits home. So why study the effects of TK? Well, first off, I teach kindergarten and TK. And our program is unique in that it's a hybrid program, and I'll get into that a little bit more. When I began teaching kindergarten and TK, this program started. So I have a lot of resonance in this program because I feel like I was one of the founding members, if that makes sense. And I also wanted data to support me. There are so many kids that could really go either way between kindergarten and TK that having data to support that would be really helpful. So the purpose of the study was to determine the impact of a year of transitional kindergarten, or TK, on academic achievement versus students who just went from preschool to kindergarten. So using the FAST assessments in the area of reading, we did the A reading test and the early reading test. We were able to determine student growth. So the amount of time spent in the TK setting was the independent variable, and there were two groups. The TK group spent a year in TK, and the bypass group spent no time in TK. Whereas the dependent variable is those FAST reading assessments, like I said, the scores they got on FAST in the fall and spring for the A reading test, which is a computer adaptive test, and the early reading test, which is paper and pencil. The hypothesis was that former TK students will show greater improvement on FAST reading assessments than students who bypass TK going from preschool to kindergarten. So the basis of all of this, the theoretical framework, was Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. So in 1959, Erik Erikson came up with 8 stages. And we find that students that are age 5, which is right when they should be entering kindergarten, are between stages 3 and 4, because stage 3 is ages 3 to 5. It's that preschool window. And stage 4 is ages 5 to 12, that elementary window. So this kindergarten age is right in the middle of that. So they're going from an initiative versus guilt stage in stage 3, looking for their purpose, to an industry versus inferiority stage where they're looking for their competence. And so without that really strong foundation in stage 3, they're not ready for stage 4, and that's what we were finding out. The rate of development in these stages affects their development later in life. So the big idea behind all of this, the conceptual framework, comes back to kindergarten readiness. Are they ready for kindergarten? And Bates found foundational skills that are critical for future success. Skills like cognitive development, linguistics, emotional intelligence, social interaction skills, communication skills, morals and values. If these things aren't put in place, the kids are not ready. Also, Bassick and Latham in 2017 did a study that compared students from 1998 to 2010 in kindergarten, and they found that students now in 2010, even though it's later than 2010, but nowadays students are much more academically rigorous. The classwork, the coursework, all of it is so much more academically rigorous. They need more concentration, more perseverance, more motivation in order to be successful. So it's a big step to make the transition from preschool to kindergarten. They go from more of a play-based setting to a very academically rigorous setting. And we find a gap in the standards. So preschool has the QPPS standards, the gold standards, and they're about here. And then kindergarten has the Iowa Core standards, and they're about here. And as you can see, there's this gap in between. So a student that is meeting preschool standards might not be ready for kindergarten. Also, another big issue in making the transition is half day to full day. Students go from a half day preschool setting to a full day kindergarten setting, and some of them have a hard time coping with that. And like I said earlier, kindergarten is much more academically rigorous. So as I was doing my research, there were no past studies to indicate research in a whole day shared hybrid program. So I took my 13 kindergarten students, 8 in the bypass group, 5 in the TK group, and I used them for the study. One of the 5 in the TK group is a special education student. There were 2 Hispanics and 11 Caucasians, 1 Hispanic per group, and all of these students were at various socioeconomic levels. The materials used were an Apple MacBook Pro laptop. I used that for my data collection and analysis. Student laptops used for the A reading test, because like I said, it was a computer adaptive test. Paper copies of the early reading test, because I have to be able to show them things. And classroom curriculum, what they're learning in order to see if there's a difference. So the procedure, the TK students have a very unique schedule in that they spend the morning with the preschool teacher in that small group, just those kids and the preschool teacher. They work on core areas like reading and math, social skills, the things that they really need to hit hard in order to be successful in kindergarten. Then in the afternoon, at lunchtime, they come into the kindergarten setting. They join the kindergarten students and me as the kindergarten teacher, and we have that large group setting. They become a cohort, if you will, of students, and we work on extending the learning further into skills like science and social studies, handwriting, reading interventions, things like that are equally as important, but maybe not as core. And then, like I said, we used FAST assessments to see if this schedule and this curriculum was successful. And we did FAST assessments in the fall, winter, and spring, but we really only compared fall and spring data. So the data analysis, those test scores were calculated. Tests were taken, ran the data, and then the data was analyzed. I used JASP paired samples t-tests. So we used the JASP system to run paired samples t-tests on both groups in both tests, fall and spring. So there were 8 tests total. There are pieces of data run. The results. So in the A reading, both groups showed statistical significance. The bypass group had a t-score of a negative 5.592 and a p-score of a negative 0.001. They were 34 points higher in spring than they were in the fall. The TK group had a t-score of a negative 6.991 with a p-value of 0.002, and they were 26 points higher. So as you can see, there's an upward trajectory for both. And also, as you can see, the TK group is higher. Early reading, both groups again showed statistical significance. The t-score for the bypass group was a negative 15.74 with a p-value of negative 0.001 and 24 points difference between fall and spring. And the TK group had a t-score of a negative 7.803 with a p-value of 0.001 and 23 points higher. So as you can see, the point growth is much closer, and by this graph you can tell that their scores are much closer on this one. But again, that TK group is higher in the fall and higher in the spring. Only in winter do we see the bypass group ever bypass the TK. So, the resulting conclusions of the study. All the groups showed growth. They all had an upward trajectory. The TK group consistently was scoring higher than the bypass group. There's a potential link between TK and the higher scores, but there are too many questions before we can really say that there's causality there. So the implications: identifying students at risk earlier, and by at risk I mean students who might need additional support. So being able to identify them earlier, students who might need special education, Title I, talented and gifted, at risk, things like that. The student assistance team, or as we like to call it, our SAT team, would be able to help suss out the students' needs sooner by doing TK. We will be able to reinforce the skills they're not fluent in. If they really need support in math, TK will help with that. It gives a more one-on-one approach, and so those students are given a year of small group one-on-one time that really helps them move further. And an easier transition to kindergarten. We've already built the rapport with the kindergarten teacher. The schedule's going to be familiar, and their skills were reinforced in TK, so they're going to go in with much more confidence. Likewise, we're breaking the negative stigma. With a program like this, it's a full day, it's a new program. It's not like typical TK. A lot of times TK is still a half-day program and it's still run very much like a preschool. Ours is run very similar to a kindergarten, just given some small group supports in the morning. And it'll help ease that transition. The teachers might be reinforced with the data for suggesting TK. So like I said, those students who could really go either way, now there's data to back up maybe TK is the right choice for this particular case. So there's that supporting data, and it allows the parents and the teacher to be proactive versus reactive. Really explaining to the parents that in doing TK, we're building the foundation that your child is going to need and not putting it on ourselves to hold them back, being reactive, but in a sense giving them what they need to be successful. And like I said, the teacher-student rapport is there because they spend 2 years with both teachers because of that shared year. And the communication and the rapport builds comfort and trust between the student and the teacher. The limitations of the study, one of the biggest limitations was the sample size. There was only 13 in the study, and that's not a representation of the whole. A larger, more diverse class might yield different results. Environmental factors. We don't know what their home life is like. Things like rules, structure, routine, schedule, discipline, academic disposition of the parents, all of these things could be very big factors in this study. Exposure to testing. So because TK by the state of Iowa is considered K, they are given the same test as the kindergarten students. So in effect, the TK class has seen this test once before because as a TK students, they take this test, and then as a kindergarten student, they take this test. So in theory, they probably should be a little bit better at the test. They're predisposed. There are so many additional questions and factors that there's no way to determine causality by this specific study. There's much more research needed. So the recommendations for future research are to alter the sample size, get a bigger sample size, try it in an urban setting. We're very, very rural, and that might be a factor. Do a longitudinal study. It would be great to do this study over a 5-year span and see if there are links between different classes or if this is a unique to each situation kind of thing. Try different tests or different subject areas. So maybe not do the FAST test or do the FAST test with math and see if that does anything. Do a study about home life and academic success correlation, or a study about the amount of reading at home, or even a study based on parent involvement in school and homework. And finally, maybe looking into the teacher's connection, the preschool teacher and the kindergarten teacher. Does their relationship matter? In conclusion, there's a gap between preschool and kindergarten. And based on Erikson's stages, we know that it's fundamental for these students to have everything they need foundationally to be successful in kindergarten. TK programs can work, and with this new program, there's less stigma attached because it's its own identity. So the hypothesis was confirmed, but there's much more research needed. I really appreciate your time. I hope that I answered all your questions. I hope that I sparked some interest in you. And if you have any additional questions, concerns, or comments, here are my references. All 3 pages of them. And have a great day.